Today, we talk about our third part of our discussion of Superman: The Greatest Story. So, the third part of Superman: The Greatest Story is actually comprising of the last three chapters of the book. As you can see here, they are listed in the table of contents. So, chapter 9 is about the thought robot, the center of the DC multiverse. Chapter 10 is about Mandrake is the opposite of life. And chapter 11 is about Final Crisis with Superman as the greatest story. So, for the third part of, of the book, I wanted to essentially um, outline or highlight those elements in Final Crisis and Superman Beyond that celebrate Superman as a character. The first two parts are kind of like an examination of what it means to be a story. We talk about the DC multiverse, the monitor, Final Crisis, and we also talk about some of the themes or the issues that they raise, especially things about comic piracy and also the you know the 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 problem of saving art or saving in the comic book medium. So chapter part three is essentially about talking about what makes Superman work as a character. And one thing I wanted to talk about first to start the part three was the fact that the thought robot is essentially um, what I call the center of the DC multiverse, in the sense that the thought robot is the most important um, character in the DC multiverse after the Mind of the Void. And the reason I say that is because the thought robot essentially is we call it a plot device, in a sense that he essentially is just a character that cannot fail, that cannot be conquered or defeated. But at the same time, there is a sense of predestination, in the sense that the thought robot is a cosmic armor that was created for the sole purpose of defeating the ultimate threat. And it was created by Dax Novu, and who became Mandrake. And the ultimate threat is essentially Mandrake. So the thought robot is essentially the center of the DC multiverse. He's the center of Superman Beyond and maybe of Final Crisis. You can argue that he's at least the center of Superman Beyond. And I wanted to go over maybe something that I think is probably the most important thing about the thought robot is power level. I wanted to talk about power levels a little bit because I think it's probably the most important thing about the thought robot. And I have in the book quotes from Marvel and DC Wiki from fandom about thought robot, and they have a tiering system. And in the tiering system, the thought robot is listed as 1A. And I think if you look at the tiering system, the 1A is probably one of the second highest um, uh, level or tier in the tiering system. I think above that is 1, which is essentially absolute omnipotence or absolute omniscience. So 1A is essentially what the thought robot is. And in the tiering system, only the monitor mind of a void is above the thought robot. So he's also called Cosmic Armor Superman. And if you look at his powers, it's really off the charts really. So his classification is high dimensional machine of the monitor's literal plot device. Again, plot device in the sense that he can be defeated. He is greater essentially than anything you can conceive. He's essentially a character that is just there for a single purpose, or is an arbitrary character if you want. There's nothing that can be done about it. You can't do anything about it. He will just take you down no matter what. And his powers and abilities: superhuman physical characteristics, immortality, self-sustenance, regeneration, non-corporeal, flight, levitation, energy manipulation, heat vision, reactive evolution, reality warping, high dimensional manipulation, spatial manipulation, time manipulation, matter manipulation, quantum manipulation, information manipulation, plot manipulation. This is very important because plot manipulation is essentially the fact that the dot robot can is actually telling the story. That's one of my greatest questions is whether the thought robot was actually the narrator of Superman Beyond 2. And the answer is he is the narrator of Superman Beyond 2. I have that part in, I think it's chapter 8 in the book, where I talk about his narration of the final crisis. And causality manipulation, of course, fourth awareness, where he's actually aware of being a character in the story and of the presence. So, and then attack potency, outerverse level, stronger than Mandrak, who held all of creation inside a jar and one-shotted the monitor. The monitors were stated by Grant Morrison to be the representations of the writers, authors of DC Comics, and were created by the primary monitor to serve as a function between itself and the tiny insignificant thought that is DC. He held Limbo with just his finger. Limbo is a realm of non-existence. Exists in the monitor sphere and was crumbling the monitor sphere during his fight with Mandrak. And also contained the bleed, which was stated by the monitor that no one outside of them could contain. So my argument in the book is that Thought Robot is actually for two reasons. Actually, the first reason is because he's actually telling a story. He's telling a story of the final crisis to the monitors and to Lois Lane. That's the first reason. The second reason is because he's also able to fight a former monitor who is Mandrak. So my argument was that Thought Robot is actually a monitor like them, like all of them. Though he's a cosmic armor Superman, he also functions as a monitor. So that explains why he is able to contain the bleed. And then speed omnipresent, lifting strength irrelevant, stronger than Mandrak the Dark Monitor, lifted the limbo, dependent on existence that is defined in every aspect as non-existent. Striking strength outerverse level, durability outerverse level. So the outerverse is essentially the realm above the multiverse, essentially. So we're talking about, and then beyond outerverse is the omniverse. So the outerverse is essentially the whole entirety of the DC multiverse, and then of course encompassing all the abstract and cosmic beings. So essentially, outerverse is essentially God. So God of the DC multiverse. So he's at that level, or you can say it's heaven, because need is supposed to be heaven of the monitor. So outerverse is essentially heaven, and it's essentially a realm, a reality that is beyond the DC multiverse, that has no dimensions, or that is beyond any dimensionality. Durability outerverse level, stamina effectively limitless, range irrelevant, standard equipment inapplicable, intelligence nigh omniscient, exists in monitor sphere, the highest and most primal level of existence, and holds a cosmic awareness regarding the nature of the soul of all reality. So that's again the plot awareness, and also the plot manipulation and the fourth wall awareness. Weakness is non-notable, notable attacks, techniques, adaptation. The Thought Robot is capable of adapting instantly to counter any feature. So that refers to the plot device, because the Thought Robot essentially it's kind of like what they call a sort of reactive evolution, where he is able to evolve beyond any attack, or at least to react to any attack and evolve beyond it, and then fight back. He gets as strong as the story demands him to be, essentially. So again, that's kind of like reactive evolution, and then also plot manipulation, because he is driven not just by his powers, he's driven by the story of Superman. So that's probably one of the most important elements is to realize that Thought Robot is driven by the story of Superman. Essentially, he's a character kind of like, um, I think he's kind of a character, kind of kind of like a godly character where he's inside this hyper story and he's telling this hyper story, and then he has an enemy, and then the story demands that he gets stronger as the enemy gets stronger, and then as he tells the story he gets stronger, and then once he realizes that he has to put in the final blow, that's when he essentially becomes as strong as the strongest, and then he defeats the enemy. So that's essentially driven by the story. So essentially that's the quintessential hero if you think about it. His vision fires beams of hate in the eyes of his enemies, marveling in this hero. So I wanted to go over this because I think when you think about it, that robot he's not really all that impressive when it comes to display of powers. However, even though at the end he has one final blast of his vision that is very impressive. But what is impressive about the thought robot is the fact that he is driven by the story. And I think it's the story essentially that um, drives everything about the thought robot. And of course, two important things that he does in Superman Beyond 2 when he fights Mandrake. One feat that he has is that he's crumbling heaven. He's crumbling, where all the monitors reside, which is essentially a realm beyond all of the DC multiverse. Essentially a heaven where there are no dimensions. It's essentially an abstract level of existence, and he's crumbling it with Mandrake. So that's very impressive. And then of course at the end the final blast of hit. So those are the two things that I thought were very impressive about that robot. But I think what we have to take away from Thought Robot is that he's essentially the story of Superman at his highest level essentially. So essentially what Graham Morrison wanted to do is essentially find the ultimate enemy, the ultimate threat, and put Superman against him and see what happens. Essentially, we knew by the end that because of the story, Superman would defeat him, but we essentially wanted to see how it happens. And I think there was no doubt that Superman was going to defeat Mandrake when you think about it. Essentially, especially since he is driven by the story. And of course, we're talking about what they call the hyper story, right? I have a definition at the end about the hyper story. Let me see. Hyper story. Let's see. I have a glossary. Okay. So, hyper story. What robot is aware of being a self-assembling hyper story? So it's essentially it's a 4-4 awareness and also a plot manipulation because since he's aware of being a hyper story, he's essentially telling the story to the monitors and to Lois Lane, but he's also manipulating it towards its conclusion, which is essentially at the end of the story where he says to be continued on his grave before he falls back into the DC multiverse. I hope you will like the book because I put a lot of work into it. One thing I have to say is that I essentially worked on it online. Essentially, I typed it and I typed it using a typeset editor called Reedsy. You can go to reedsy.com, REEDSY, and I really enjoyed working on the book. It's essentially as a fan inspired book because I was a fan of Final Crisis and I was very stimulated by it. I thought the Superman Beyond 2 was probably one of the highest moments of the book. At least as a fan of Superman, I thought it was the highest moment. of the book, or I guess this highest moment of Superman and Beyond, just because of how the battle um, was penciled and drawn, and I also like the storytelling in Superman Beyond too. I thought the fact that they put it as a 3D was very was awesome. It was great. I really loved it. Um, if you're a fan of Superman Beyond and Final Crisis, you will definitely like this book. Um, in the last chapter, I go over why Superman is a greater story, and I essentially wrap everything up. I wrap things up, and I essentially talk about some of the things that I really like to do on database comics, which is talk about feats. You can check my wiki, Power Level wiki, on database comics, and you will see feat ratings um, wikis essentially, and I hope you will like this book. Okay, bye.